I am Sandeep C, Joint Secretary of Law and Justice Research Foundation, Kerala State Chapter. So, in the last class, we have discussed about different sources of law, and within the different sources of law, we lastly discussed about international treaties and how what are the different steps involved in the conclusion of international treaty we have discussed based on the Vienna Convention of Law Treaty 1969. Now, in this particular recorded video, we will be discussing how the different sources of international law, how the different sources of international law are adopted into municipal law of nation states. Okay, so creating international law through the different sources of international law is not enough, or it will be useless if there is no way of adopting such international law into the municipal law. If there is no way to enforce international law into municipal law, the whole effort of identifying the different sources of law will be useless. So one has to understand how international law take effect in the internal laws of a state. Okay, and what happens if there is a conflict between international law and municipal law? Which law will prevail? Okay, so these two questions needs to be answered uh, by discussing the relationship between international law and municipal law. Okay, okay. Now, what do you mean by municipal law? Municipal law is a technical term given by international lawyers to the national or internal law of a state. Okay, that is what you mean by municipal law. One can also say municipal law is otherwise known as domestic law. Okay. Now, with that said, let us see how international law interact with municipal law and vice versa. Okay, what is the relationship between international law and municipal law? We can discuss the relationship between international law and municipal law with the help of two important theories that tries to articulate what is the basis of relationship between municipal law and international law. Okay, so the two important theories include the dualistic or pluralistic theory on the relationship between municipal law and international law, and the monoistic or unitary theory of relationship between international law and municipal law. Okay, so the dualistic or pluralistic theory of relationship between international law and municipal law is mainly propounded by Heinrich Treipel. He is one of the very famous jurists who has popularized the dualistic or pluralistic theory, uh, and the monoistic or unitary theory is made popular by Hans Kelsen, another very famous and important jurist. Please keep in mind the name of these two jurists with regard to these two theories on the relationship between international law and municipal law. So basically, what do they say? How do they explain the relationship between international law and municipal law? Okay, if you look into dualistic or pluralistic theory, as the title suggests, or as the nomenclature of that particular theory suggests, it says that international law and municipal law are two different legal systems. Okay, that is what dualistic or pluralistic theory is trying to say. They are two different legal systems, and international law has to be transformed into municipal law in order to enforce international law within municipal law. How do you transform international law into municipal law according to the dualistic or pluralistic theory? The dualistic or the pluralistic theory says that international law and municipal law are two different legal systems, and in order for international law to be enforced in municipal law, international law has to be transformed into municipal law by enacting a legislation, a domestic legislation or a municipal legislation by the legislature based on the international law. Okay, so by enacting a legislation, domestic legislation, international law has to be transformed into municipal law by the legislature. Okay, so it is otherwise known as doctrine of transformation. Okay, now moving on to monoistic or unitary theory of relationship between international law and municipal law by Hans Kelsen. According to monoistic theory, international law and municipal law are the same, are of the same legal system. They are part of the same bigger picture. Okay, there is no difference between municipal law and international law. They are part of the same legal system. And in other words, international law can be directly implemented or enforced within municipal law without transforming that particular international law into a municipal law by the legislature. Okay, that is monoistic theory or unitary theory of international law, and the mode of adopting international law into municipal law without transforming that international law into a particular legislation by the legislature, it is otherwise known as doctrine of incorporation. Okay, please keep in mind. Okay, so another important difference is, according to dualistic or pluralistic theory of relationship between international law and municipal law, if there is a conflict between international law and municipal law, municipal law should prevail. Okay, whenever there is a conflict between international law and municipal law, according to dualistic or pluralistic theory, municipal law should prevail. Okay, whereas in monoistic or unitary theory of relationship between international law and municipal law, if there is a conflict between international law and municipal law, the international law should prevail. Okay, that is monoistic or unitary theory of relationship between international law and municipal law. Okay, now keeping in mind these two theories on the relationship between international law and municipal law, let us look at the approaches, different approaches that are taken with regard to adopting international law into municipal law, or adopting municipal law into international law at the international level, and also at the municipal level. Okay, let us see. Okay, what is the attitude of international law towards municipal law? Okay, that is my question. Let us discuss. The attitude of international law towards municipal law is monoistic or unitary. Okay, what do I mean by saying the attitude of international law towards municipal law is monoistic? Okay, as I have mentioned, according to monoistic or unitary theory on the relationship between international law and municipal law, international law and municipal law are the same, and if there is a conflict between international law and municipal law, international law should prevail. Okay, that is monoistic. So why do I say the attitude of international law towards municipal law is monoistic? That can be seen if you read Article 27 of the Vienna Convention on Law of Treaties 1969. According to Article 27, a party may not invoke the provisions of its internal law as a justification for its failure to perform a treaty. Okay, that is what Article 27 of VCLT 1969 is saying. In other words, if a municipal law comes into conflict with the international law, Article 27 is saying international law will prevail. That is what Article 27 is saying. Okay. And this was affirmed by the Permanent Court of International Justice in the case of Free Zone of Upper Savoy and the district of Gex. Okay, the case was between France versus Switzerland, and in this case, the Permanent Court of International Justice said it is certain that France cannot rely on her own legislation to limit the scope of her international obligation. Okay, this was the observation made by the PCIJ, and this is in accordance with Article 27. Okay, this is in accordance with the philosophy of monoistic theory or unitary theory on the relationship between international law and municipal law. It evidences the attitude of international law towards municipal law. Okay. Now moving on. The attitude of international law towards municipal law is again made evident by the judgment of judgment made by the Alabama Claims Tribunal in the case of Alabama claims of the United States of America against Great Britain. This was this judgment was made by the Permanent Court of International Arbitration, uh, and in this particular case, what happened was the Alabama in the Alabama claims tribunal case, the British Britain was held liable for violating the Treaty of Neutrality between the American federal government and the Confederation of Southern States. When while there was a civil war that was happening in the United States, Great Britain maintained a neutrality between the Northern federal government, U.S. federal government, and the Confederation of Southern States. And the United States alleged that this neutrality was violated by Great Britain by when Great Britain, you know, became an accomplice or became or failed to prevent the construction of a warship for the Confederation of Southern States by a British shipbuilding company. Okay, when Great Britain failed to prevent a British shipbuilding company from building a warship for the Southern Confederation states, the federal government of United States claimed that Britain violated the Treaty of Neutrality between which it claimed to have maintained between US and the Confederation of Southern States, and therefore Britain was held to have violated the Treaty of Washington. Okay. Uh, and in this particular case, it was held that no municipal law may be relied upon as a justification for violating international law. Okay, in this case, Great Britain held as a defense its own legislations. in its defense, Great Britain held that there was no law within Great Britain which prevented that British company from building a warship for the Confederation of Southern States, again, which was waging a civil war against the U.S. federal government. Okay, this defense was held to be untenable and not justifiable by the tribunal, uh, and it was held to be violation of Article 1 of the Treaty of Washington, through which Britain agreed to maintain a neutrality between the U.S. federal government and the Confederation of Southern States in the American Civil War. Okay, so keep in mind all these case laws which establish the monoistic nature of attitude of international law towards municipal law. So, according to the international approach towards municipal law, uh, uh, according to the attitude of international law towards municipal law, it is in the nature of monoism. Monoism. Okay. In other words, whenever there is a conflict between international law and municipal law, international law should prevail. Okay, that is the attitude of international law towards municipal law that we have seen in the case laws and the provisions of Vienna Convention of Law treaties under Article 27. Now, moving on, what is the attitude of municipal law towards international law? We have discussed the attitude of international law towards municipal law, and we have understood it is in the nature of monoism. Okay. Now, what is the attitude of municipal law towards international law? uh, Actually, when you try to analyze the attitude of municipal law towards international law, there are two approaches. Okay, one is the approach made through the doctrine of transformation, and the second one is the approach made through a doctrine of incorporation. The attitude of municipal law towards international law is both monoistic and dualistic. Okay, let me explain. Okay, the approach of or attitude of municipal law towards international law can be explained through two doctrines: doctrine of transformation and doctrine of incorporation. What do you mean by doctrine of transformation? I have mentioned this much earlier in our previous slide, but again, let me explain it further. According to doctrine of transformation, doctrine of transformation is in line with the dualistic theory of relationship between municipal law and international law. Okay, this doctrine of transformation is in line with dualistic theory. So, what do you mean by doctrine of transformation? According to doctrine of transformation, uh, in order to adopt international law into municipal law, international law has to be transformed into a municipal law by enacting a legislation based on the provisions of international law by the legislature of a particular state. Okay, and according to doctrine of transformation, here when you are transforming international law into municipal law, the courts are enforcing municipal law and not international law. Okay, that is doctrine of transformation. According to doctrine of transformation, the international law and municipal law are two different legal systems. Okay, please remember the dualistic theory, and since they are two different legal systems, international law has to be transformed into municipal law by enacting a legislation based on the provisions of international law by the legislature. Hence, it is known as doctrine of transformation. Doctrine of transformation. Okay. Now, in doctrine of transformation, when the judiciary or the court is interpreting municipal law, which is transformed from international law. They are not enforcing international law, rather they are enforcing municipal law, since international law has been transformed into municipal law. Okay. In the doctrine of transformation, if there is contradiction between municipal law and international law should prevail. Okay, that is doctrine of transformation. Now coming into doctrine of incorporation. What do you mean by doctrine of incorporation? Doctrine of incorporation is the attitude of municipal law where it considers a municipal law as same as international law. Okay, this is in accordance with the monoistic theory. And here there is no need in doctrine of incorporation. What happens is international law uh, in its original form is incorporated into municipal law without any transformation into municipal law. Okay, unlike doctrine of transformation, doctrine of incorporation is where the principles of international law, the provisions of international law is directly incorporated into municipal law without any transformation, without any modification. Okay. In doctrine of incorporation, municipal law and international law are considered as part and parcel of the same legal system. Okay. And here the international law has to be interpreted by the court in its original form, and it is considered that the court has to enforce international law as it is without any transformation into municipal law. And also in doctrine of incorporation, if there is a conflict between international law and any existing municipal law, the international law will prevail over municipal law. Okay, that is doctrine of incorporation. Now let us see. Let us see the point of view of different countries with regard to doctrine of incorporation and doctrine of transformation. What is the point of view of different countries with regard to doctrine of incorporation and the doctrine of transformation? Which type of doctrines they adopt with regard to different sources of international law? First, we take the US point of view. We first take the US point of view with regard to attitude of municipal law towards international law. Okay, if you look into the Constitution of the United States, in Article 6, Section 2, it says that treaties shall be the supreme law of the land. Treaties are negotiated by the president, but can be ratified only with the approval of 2/3 majority of the state Senate. Okay, that is provided under Article 2 of the US Constitution. Okay, so in the United States, the treaties are incorporated into municipal law without any modification. They are incorporated into municipal law as it is. Okay, so this is a classical example of adopting the doctrine of incorporation. This is a classical example where we can see the theory of monoism in practice. Okay, so the only condition that has to be satisfied is that that particular treaty has to be ratified by 2/3 majority of the Senate, that is provided under Article 2 of the US Constitution. But there are few exceptions. There are certain powers that are there. These powers are known as powers of the president. That is the powers of the president to execute or ratify certain agreements without the approval of the Senate. There are certain exceptions, and these agreements that are made by president without the ratification of the Senate is known as executive agreements. these executive agreements that are made by the president without the ratification of the Senate has little or minor consequence for the rights of US citizens. Okay, so that is why they do not require any approval of the Senate, and the president himself or herself can ratify that particular treaty. Okay, there are very few and far between. Generally, in order for a treaty to be enforced within United States, generally, in order for a treaty to be incorporated into the municipal law of United States, there is a need of two-third majority of the Senate, according to Article 2 of the US Constitution. So, with regard to treaties, United States, through its Constitution, has taken the point of view of doctrine of incorporation, or the point of view of theory of monoism, okay, with regard to international treaties. Okay, what is the approach taken by the judiciary in the United States? If you look into the case of Sai Fuji versus State of California, you can see that the Californian Supreme Court held that the UN Charter was not self-executing because its relevant principles concerning human rights lacked the mandatory quality and certainty required to create justifiable rights for private persons upon its ratification, since the ruling has been consistently applied by other courts in the United States. Basically, you see the treaties are classified into self-executory and non-self-executory. Okay, those treaties which requires the ratification of the two-third majority ratification of the Senate is known as non-self-executory, and those treaties which does not require the ratification, two-third majority ratification of the Senate is known as self-executory. Okay, only the signature of the president is required. So in the case of Sai Fuji versus State of California, the Californian Supreme Court held that the UN Charter is not self-executing. In other words, in order for the UN Charter to be enforced in the United States, uh, the signature of the president alone is not enough. There should be a two-third majority ratification by the Senate. Okay, Senate is one. It is part of the legislative body of United States, representing the states, the different states, federal states in India. Not in India, sorry, in the United States. So this is a particular case law in the United States which demonstrates how the doctrine of incorporation is enforced within the United States. Okay, what are the criteria that is required for in order to identify a treaty as non-self-executory and self-executory? Okay, please keep in mind. Now moving on to another case law that was made by the US Supreme Court in Paqueta Havana. The Paqueta Havana case we have already discussed in our previous classes. This was a case where the US Marines confiscated a Cuban ship during the American-Spanish War. Okay, and here the US Supreme Court held that civilian ships cannot be, claimed as war, you know, um, uh, the uh, profits of war. Okay, it cannot be confiscated as profits of war. Okay, or spoils of war. A civilian ship cannot be confiscated as spoils of war. That was the judgment given by the US Supreme Court in Paquete Havana case, when the US Navy confiscated a Cuban ship during the American-Spanish War. Hmm? And the US Supreme Court held that this is in accordance with international customary law. Okay, international customary law. And international customary law is part of US municipal law. That was the judgment given by the Supreme Court in Paquete Havana case. Here again we see the doctrine of incorporation. We see the theory of monoism in practice. Okay, so with regard to international conventions and also with regard to international customs, the United States point of view is leaning towards the monoistic theory uh, or the doctrine of incorporation. Okay, so please keep in mind. Now let us move on to the point of view of United Kingdom with regard to attitude of municipal law towards international law. Okay, so with regard to customary international law, United Kingdom takes the point of view of doctrine of incorporation or the monoistic theory of relationship between municipal law and international law. Okay, that is when it comes to customary international law within United Kingdom, international customary practices are part of UK municipal law, and this was acknowledged by the judiciary in United Kingdom in the case of Text Trading Corporation versus Central Bank of Nigeria, where the court held that the English court at any given time discover what is the prevailing international rule and apply that rule. Okay, in other words, if there is any contradiction between international law and the municipal law of UK, the international law should be given, you know, the international law should be implemented as far as possible. The international law should be reconciled with municipal law as far as possible. Okay, so here what we can see is the point of view taken by UK with regard to customary international law is the point of view of doctrine of incorporation or doctrine of or the theory of monoism. Okay, and that is in line with the point of view taken by United States. Okay, so with regard to customary international law, both UK and United States takes the point of view of doctrine of incorporation. So what is the approach or point of view taken by the United Kingdom with regard to international conventions? With regard to international conventions, UK takes the doctrine of transformation, okay, or the theory of dualism on the relationship between municipal law and international law. That is, international conventions that adopted and ratified by United Kingdom has to be transformed into the municipal law of the land. Okay, has to be transformed into the municipal law of United Kingdom by enacting or amending of a statute by the legislature of United Kingdom. Okay, unless and until the legislature of United Kingdom enacts or amends a particular statute which has incorporated the provisions of international law that was ratified, that particular international law cannot be enforced. So in United Kingdom, with regard to international conventions, that international convention has to be transformed into a municipal law, okay, into a municipal legislation by the legislature. So with regard to international conventions, UK take the point of view of doctrine of transformation or the theory of dualism. Okay, that is what we can see. The 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 monoistic or the doctrine of transformative approach taken by United Kingdom with regard to international treaty is summarized as the Ponsonby Rule. Ponsonby Rule is otherwise known as the rule where the text of any agreement or treaty proposed to be ratified accept or accepted shall be tabled before the Parliament, UK Parliament, at least 21 days before such action. Okay, that is what is meant by Ponsonby rule, and this is in accordance with the doctrine of transformation, or the theory of dualism with regard to relationship between municipal law and international law. So, unlike the United States, which has taken doctrine of incorporation, or the monoistic theory with regard to incorporating international law into municipal law, UK has taken the approach of doctrine of transformation, and that is clearly made evident by the Ponsonby rule. Ponsonby rule. Okay, keep in mind this particular rule, the Ponsonby rule. Okay, this is part of common law. Okay, now what are the cases where in which parliamentary assent to treaty are necessary within United Kingdom? Okay, there are certain cases or circumstances where the assent of parliament is necessary for ratifying a treaty, or the doctrine of transformative approach is necessary. Okay, what are those situations? So the assent of the parliament is necessary when treaties affecting rights and duties of individuals in UK are entered into. Okay, treaties expanding the power of the crown also requires assent of the parliament. Treaties expanding the treaties imposing financial burden on the state requires assent of the parliament. Treaties requiring the parliamentary consent for its enforcement requires assent of the parliament. Treaties dealing with subject matters reserved for the parliament also requires assent of the parliament. Okay, these are the different scenarios where the assent of the parliament is required for the ratification or enforcement of the treaty. Okay, that is within United Kingdom. Okay, so there are also cases where the parliamentary assent to treaty are not necessary within United Kingdom, and there is only two situations where the assent of the parliament is not required with regard to treaties, and these two situations include treaties relating to conduct of war or cessation of territory within UK. The second one is treaties on relatively unimportant administrative matters, provided that particular agreement or a treaty does not affect existing municipal law. Okay, so these are two situations where the assent of the parliament is not required. Now, what is the Indian point of view? Next, we discuss the Indian point of view with regard to attitude of municipal law towards international law. How international law is incorporated into municipal law when with regard to India. What is the provisions? Okay. First, we look at Article 51 of the Indian Constitution. If you read Article 51 of the Indian Constitution, it says that the state shall endeavor to promote international peace and security, maintain just and honorable relationship between nations, foster respect for international law and treaty obligations in dealings of organized people with one another, and encourage settlement of international dispute by arbitration. Okay, so these Article 51 is very important. It says that the state shall make all endeavors necessary for the enforcement and protection of international law for international peace and security. So in other words, Article 51 is saying that Indian state is obliged to follow and implement international law. Okay. So how international law is implemented within Indian municipal law? What is the step that is taken? Let us see. whether it is a monoistic approach or a dualistic approach, whether it is India is following the doctrine of incorporation or doctrine of transformation. What is that? What is the approach taken by India? India, now we discuss the approach of India with regard to adoption of municipal law into international law. What is the attitude of Indian municipal law towards international law? Unlike UK and United States, uh, India takes a very mixed approach with regard to international conventions and international customs. Uh, by what I mean by mixed approach is that it takes a combination of monoism and dualism, or a combination of doctrine of incorporation and doctrine of transformation. Let me explain. If you look into the observation made by the Indian Supreme Court in Keshavananda Bharati versus State of Kerala, you will see that Chief Justice Sikri relied upon the provisions of the United Nations Charter when there was ambiguity within the Indian Constitution. Okay, uh, in order to provide clarity to the wordings of the Indian Constitution, the Supreme Court relied upon international law, especially the UN Charter with regard to property rights. In the UN Charter, it is an international convention, and the international convention was relied upon to provide clarity to the Indian Constitution when it was vague, because it is assumed that Indian Constitution is in accordance with international law. Here we can see a monoistic approach or a doctrine of incorporation. Okay, and basically, in Keshavananda Bharati versus Union of India, the Supreme Court is saying where the language of the municipal law is ambiguous or rather intractable, the court must rely upon parent international authority of municipal law. In other words, when Indian Constitution is ambiguous, you can depend upon international law for clarification. It evidences the Supreme Court flexible approach towards monoistic theory or the doctrine of incorporation. So basically, international law is incorporated into the Indian Constitution when the Indian Constitution is ambiguous. Okay, and the international provisions of international law, whether it is an international convention or international custom, when if it can provide clarity, further clarity to the Indian Constitution, it can be incorporated. In other words, the Supreme Court can take the approach of doctrine of incorporation or the approach of monoistic theory. Okay. Now let us look into another case law. If you analyze the judgment given by Indian Supreme Court in Vellore Citizens Welfare Forum versus Union of India, you see, in this particular case, the Supreme Court upheld the validity of principle of sustainable development. The principle of sustainable development was part of international customary law, where it called for the polluter pay and precautionary rule. It laid down the polluter pays and precautionary rule to combat environmental pollution, and the principle of sustainable development, polluter pay and precautionary rule was adopted from international customary law by the Supreme Court, and it was held that it is almost acceptable preposition of law that the rules of international customary law which are not contradictory to municipal law shall be deemed to have been incorporated in domestic law and shall be followed by the court of law. In other words, as long as international customary laws are not contradicting municipal law, To that extent, international customary law can be incorporated into municipal law. Okay, uh, where we can see uh, the monoistic approach of or the monoistic theory in practice. Okay, we can see the doctrine of incorporation in practice. Whereas if there is a conflict between municipal law and international custom, which will prevail? uh, in Vellore versus State of Citizens Welfare Forum versus Union of India, the Supreme Court is saying that if there is a conflict between international custom and the municipal law, the municipal law will prevail. Here we can see the dualistic approach. Okay, in this particular judgment, we can see both dualistic and monoistic theories adopted by the Supreme Court. When the international customary practice is not contradicting municipal law, it will be incorporated. That we up to that we see the monoistic point of view. But in a scenario where the municipal law comes into contradiction with the international law, municipal law will prevail. Where in that scenario, we see uh, the dualistic theory coming into life. Okay, coming alive, or the doctrine of transformation coming into play. Okay, so the Value Citizen Welfare Forum versus Union of India illustrates the flexible approach of the Supreme Court of India when it comes to adopting uh, both monoistic and dualistic theories together. Okay. Now, so the judiciary, Indian judiciary is totally different from United Kingdom and US, where we in with regard to United States, we saw a clear cut utilization of monoism or doctrine of incorporation, where we saw a clear cut utilization of both monoism and dualism in United Kingdom. Uh, but when it comes to India, the the judiciary takes a very flexible approach. It can utilize both monoism and dualism at the same time. Okay. Also in Vishaga versus State of Rajasthan, we clearly see the utilization of both monoism and dualism together. In Vishaga versus State of Rajasthan, the Supreme Court held that there was no need for transforming international law into municipal law in India. There is no need for the parliament to ratify an international law as long as an international law is not contradicting the municipal law of India. Okay, as long as an international law which is not ratified by India is not in contradiction, and the incorporation of that particular international law is necessary in order to bridge a gap in the municipal law of India, the Indian judiciary can adopt the provisions of international law into India as a guideline provided by the judiciary in order to rectify the gap or ambiguity within the law of the land. Okay, so there is two conditions. Okay, there should be a gap within the municipal law, and the gap can be filled by international law that is not ratified by the Indian Parliament. And the second condition is such international law should not be in contradiction with any existing municipal law. So basically, we are seeing that the here in Vishaga versus State of Rajasthan, the Supreme Court of India adopted the elimination of discrimination, all forms of discrimination against women, Convention on the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, otherwise known as CEDAW. Okay, that was a convention that was ratified in China, which was not that was concluded in China, which was not ratified by India. Okay, the Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women was not ratified by India. Even though it was not ratified by India, the Supreme Court adopted its provisions into as a guideline for combating sexual harassment at workplace. Okay, and the Supreme Court held that it can do this as long as that particular convention not ratified by the Indian Parliament is not contradicting the Indian Constitution or any existing municipal law. At the same time, it aids the Supreme Court to fill the gap. Okay, so here again we see the flexible approach, the interchangeable approach of the Supreme Court, taken by the Supreme Court, adopting both the positives of dualism and monoism. Okay. Now, the Indian Constitution, if you take a literal interpretation of the Indian Constitution, the Indian Constitution calls for the dualistic approach when it comes to international conventions, adopting international conventions into municipal law. If you read Article 253 of the Indian Constitution calls for the doctrine of transformation. Okay, when it comes to adopting international law into municipal law, Article 253 says that Parliament, the Indian Parliament, notwithstanding anything contained in this chapter, the Indian Parliament has the power to make any law for the enforcement of any treaty, agreement, or convention with any other country or countries, or any decision made at any international conference, association, or any body. Okay. In other words, every treaty or every agreement made by the international made by India, it has to be ratified by the Indian Parliament. It has to be transformed into a municipal law of India. Okay, and examples include the International Monetary Fund and Banks Act 1945, which is a legislation enacted by the Indian Parliament to implement the rights and obligations coming under IMF Articles of Agreement and IBRD Articles of Agreement. Okay. Another example is the United Nations Privilege and Immunity Act 1947, enacted by the Indian Parliament to enforce the provisions of Article 104 and Article 105 of the UN Charter. Okay. Another example includes the Territorial Waters, Continental Shelf, Exclusive Economic Zone, and other Maritime Zone Act 1976 to implement rights and obligations under the United Nations Conference on Law of the Sea 1982. Okay. So these are examples where the Article 253 is being exercised, is being practiced, and Article 253 of the Indian Constitution call for the Parliament to take the dualistic approach, whereas when you look into the judiciary takes both dualism and monoism. The judiciary takes a very flexible approach because the judiciary has a very wide constitutional powers, more than the Parliament. But if you take a very strict reading or literal reading of the Indian Constitution calls for the dualistic approach, the dualistic theory of adoption of international law into municipal law, and that is provided under Article 253. Okay. So these are the different approaches taken by different countries, including India, when it comes to adopting international law into municipal law. Now, finally, let us look into codification of international law. We have discussed the different sources of international law. We have discussed how international law is incorporated into municipal law. Finally, one final aspect is codification of international law. International law is increasingly codified into different international treaties. Okay, all existing international convention customary practices are codified into different international conventions. Okay, this is because of a mandate that is given within the UN Charter. If you look into Article 13 of the UN Charter, it calls for codification of the international law. Okay, codification of international customary practices into international conventions. Okay, for this purpose, the General Assembly has constituted the International Law Commission that I have mentioned earlier. So the Statute of International Law Commission is created by the General Assembly in 1947 by passing Resolution 485 Clause 5 of 12th December 1950, and through adopting this resolution in conjunction with the General Assembly Resolution 174 of 21st November 1947, the Statute of International Law Commission has been drafted, and the International Law Commission has been given the mandate of promoting the progressive development of international law and its codification. So the International Law Commission has two objectives. One is to promote the progressive development of international law, where it tries to codify international aspects of international law which are unexplored, which are undeveloped. Okay. So examples include draft articles on the protection of persons in the event of disasters. Okay. So in the modern era, in the 21st century, disasters caused by climate change is very important, and it is gaining relevance. And the aspects of disaster management is not developed, not very much developed in international law. And the International Law Commission is trying to develop the important principles of disaster management in international law through the draft articles on the protection of persons in the event of disaster with commentaries. Okay, it has become part of humanitarian law. Another important example is the International Law Commission draft article relating to the protection of environment relating to in relation to armed conflict. Again, it's part of humanitarian and environmental law. Very recently, in the 21st century, only in the 21st century, the impact on environment by warfare has been coming to play, and it is not very much developed, and it has only gained relevance very recently. And the International Law Commission is trying to speed up the process by codifying important principles with regard to environmental damage caused by warfare. Okay. Now, coming into codification of international law, unlike the progressive development of international law, where International Law Commission is trying to codify principles of international law which are not explored or not developed. In the codification of International Law Commission is basically trying to codify unwritten, uncodified international customary practices, which are already being practiced by actions and omissions by members in international community. Okay. Examples include the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights 1966, entered into force on 1976, Vienna Convention on Law Treaty 1969, International Convention on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights 1966, United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea, Vienna Convention on Law of Treaties between International Organization and States 1986. All these international conventions codified by the International Law Commission. It's a codification of existing international customary laws. Okay. So these are the two important duties of the International Law Commission, through which International Law Commission aids in the progressive development and codification. Progressive development of international law and codification are two different things. Please keep in mind. With this, I end my class. Thank you for your patience and time. I will see you soon with the Q&A session in our live class. Okay. Thank you, everyone.